Down today. Oh, it's recording. Brilliant. Well, hello. Welcome to Mr. Mack-Poole's guide through AO2 and AO3 on your NEA for the French Revolution. I just want to explain how you would hit getting certain grades for this. So with regards to AO2, you simply must write about source value. If you don't write or evaluate the value of sources in your NEA, you won't get any marks, and there's 10 marks for that. Altogether, there are 40 marks for your NEA, which comprises 20% of your final A level. So make no mistake, what you're doing right now, in this room, right now, will contribute to your final grade, okay? And it gives you a nice security blanket. Often, students do better on their NEAs than they do on their final exams, okay? Most of the time. So it's very nice to get that security blanket in. Now, the sources which you really should have located are from your Enlightenment thinker. So you need to have different types of sources as well, okay? At least 2 different types of sources. So if you can garner some quotes from your Enlightenment thinkers, and I think you probably would have selected Jean-Jacques Rousseau, man is born free, but everywhere he's in chains. So you've got your hand up. How can I help you? Frozen. Do you want to turn it on and turn it off again? Yeah. Right. Okay. Right. Anyway, where was I? So Jean-Jacques Rousseau, you choose a quote for him. Montesquieu and Marat analyze their quote. Why is it of value to a historian? Okay. Now, really, I would write about those Enlightenment thinkers in chronological order, and you can show how they impact on one another. Of particular use, I think, is Marat, because he wrote at the time that the French Revolution happened, and he wrote about it in violent terms. This is a nice intertwining you can do of AO2 and AO3, because you can get a Simon Schama reference. The revolution was violence itself, okay, in there. And Marat called for violence. So it would seem that Simon Schama's analysis of that is good. Now, if you can fit in historical analysis throughout your NEA, you're going to get higher marks. Also, you should have sourced an oral quote from King Louis. I don't see why you wouldn't. It may be unwise, but I wish to be loved. Okay, so that shows how foolish the king is. He admits that he's a fool. If you're unwise, what's the difference of being unwise? A fool. So the head of state admitting he's a fool. So really, the value of that quote would show what a poor leader that he is by his own admission. It wouldn't exactly galvanize confidence in him from his advisors and the public. Also, you can source pictorial sources of political cartoons of the Ancien regime or of Mary Antoinette's boat hair. What value does that have to a historian? Okay, so when we're talking about the value, think about what value these quotes have to a historian. Okay, if it's an Enlightenment quote and it's criticizing the Ancien regime, or it's highlighting why power should be separated, that's going to have value, because we know as historians that there was a huge bourgeois element to the revolution. We know that over 50% of French people could read. Of the bourgeois classes, that percentage I would estimate would be far higher. So we know that if these are written in French and near the time of the French Revolution, as historians, we would surmise this would have a positive impact. Now, there is a limitation to that source value, because we would know as historians that the peasantry would be least likely to be impacted by the ideas of the Enlightenment, because they would be the least literate class. So a French peasant from the rural part of France, where it's just like a farm, and they live on a farm, and they can't read, they're going to be least impacted by that, aren't they? But a bourgeois man from Paris is going to be most affected by that. Okay, do we see the limitations and the strength of the sources for that? Now, moving on to AO3, the best approach is a little bit all the time throughout, so little and often, to reference AO3 all the time. Okay, so Simon Schama's kind of like the go-to person, because he's a contrarian revisionist. Now, why is he a contrarian revisionist? Well, if you go onto the internet and you write in the historiography of the French Revolution, that is how historians have analysed the French Revolution, what you would find out is that most historians have taken a Marxist approach, okay? And that is that they believe this is a class-driven revolution from the bourgeois with the ideas of the Enlightenment. Now, why is this? How can you actually logically say this? Well, people have starved throughout history, but there's only been real two revolutions of note on class-based terms, the French Revolution and the Russian Revolution. So there must have been something different going on at that time, okay? It can't just be that people were hungry, right, and they wanted to change. There's got to be something different in the character of that change. So a Marxist historian who was writing the 1920s after the Russian Revolution is likely to be inspired by the ideas of Marx and this grand experiment of Marxism, and think that the French Revolution was completely bourgeois. Okay, Simon Sharma is writing from a completely different view. He's bored, okay, of all this agreement, okay, of all this bourgeois revolution. So he's taken a completely different approach. He's chronicled it. He's taken it day by day, which is unusual. Most historians will take a thematic approach. Also, he's done something much more. He's simplified it very oddly and dressed it up very cleverly. But what he said is, it's just that the French Revolution was violence itself. Okay, violence was the cause of the French Revolution. Okay, he doesn't see it in these class-based terms. He sees it in these eruptions of violence throughout France. Okay, seems a very odd way of analysing it. I personally go for a more Marxist interpretation, but you don't have to. You don't have to. You can surmise it any way you want. I'm not going to mark you down if you want to favour Simon Sharma, as long as you can logically make some nice, coherent arguments, evaluating and analysing. That'll be fine. In your conclusion, I'll definitely mention historians in their historical analysis. Okay. Now, what you should do, see what I've just done. I've mentioned when I've mentioned the historians, I've mentioned the context of the time they're writing and now how that impacts on their analysis. You should do the same. It says so in your mark scheme. And I will leave it there. Okay. And I'm going to upload this video very soon. Stop.